Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Kiri Bharatari. Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Kiri Bharatari. Yasodanandana Prachachana Ranjana Yasodanandana Prachachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading Canto 10, Chapter 15, and the text is 36. There's a relatively short purport, so we'll chant the verse responsively. Tata Krishnam cha Ramam cha Natayo denukasyaye Krostaro byadravan sarve Samrabda hata bandava Tata Krishnam cha Ramam cha Natayo denukasyaye Krostaro byadravan sarve Samrabda hata bandava Tata Krishnam cha Ramam cha Natayog denukasyaye Krostaro byadravan sarve Samrabda hata bandava. Please chant. Tata Krishnam cha Ramam cha Yatayo Denukasye Krosaro Bhadravan Sarve Samrabda Hatabandava Tata Krishnam cha Ramam cha Natayo Denukasye Krosaro Bhadravan Sarve Samrabda Hatabandava Tata Krishnam Charamam Cha Yatayo Denukatye Yo Bhadravan Sarve Samrabda Hatabandava. Thank you. So the word for word, Tata, then Krishnam, at Lord Krishna, Cha, and Ramam, Lord Rama, Cha, and Nataya, the asses. Oh, did I get that wrong? Abhadravan. Oh, sorry, I see. Nataya, the intimate companions. Denukaya, of Denuka. Ye, who. Krotaha, the asses. Abhadravan, attacked. Sarve, all. Sambradaha, enraged. Hata Bandava, their friend having been killed. So, the translation, text 36. The other ass demons, close friends of Dhenukasura, were enraged upon seeing his death, and thus they all immediately ran to attack Krishna and Balaram. Purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sanatana Goswami makes the following comment on this verse. Quote, it is stated here that the ass demon first attacked Krishna and then Balaram, Krishnam Charamam Cha. One reason for this is that the demons, having seen the prowess of Lord Balaram, thought it wise to attack Krishna first. Or it may be that out of affection for his elder brother, Lord Krishna placed himself between Balaram and the ass demons. The words Krishnam Charamam Cha may also be understood to indicate that Lord Balaram, out of affection for his younger brother, went to Lord Krishna's side. Close quote. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vishapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Padaswami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we've come to a point in this narration of the killing of Dinakasura where the other as demons, they're feeling enraged at seeing the death of Dinakasura. This is because they were his close friends. Now, there's a description of how this transpired, and I'm going to draw from Srila Kavikarnapura from Ananda Vrindavan Champu. So I'm just going to read a short little section that leads up to this moment. And this is how he describes. Before the invincible Lord Denuka looked like a grasshopper jumping into a fire. Intending to kill them, he charged Balaram and violently kicked the Lord's chest with the hooves of his hind legs. With the fingers of his left hand, Balaram seized Denuka by his hooves and threw him into the top of a palm tree. The demon groaned loudly and died. That was just a brief description given by Srila Kavikarnapura. So it's interesting in where we've come to in today's verse, the description highlights the response of Dinakasura's friends. So, I mean, at least from this description, one gets a sense that Dinakasura was pretty insignificant in comparison to the two lords that he was attempting to attack. I mean, being described as a grasshopper jumping into a fire, it paints a picture of his great insignificance and his very certain destruction. So at the point we're now, so seeing the death of Denuka, the fellow ass demons sought revenge for the loss of their close friend. So large numbers of donkeys immediately attacked Krishna and Balaram. So you have this scenario where a huge amount of donkeys are coming specifically targeting. So even though there's many cowherd boys, they're specifically targeting Krishna and Balaram. So two very young boys. Yeah, naturally, we know the particular extraordinary strength and abilities of these two young boys, but at least from the external, this is what is being seen. And but the two brothers easily killed them all. This is from Srila Kavikarnapura. So quite extraordinary when you really think about it, because one sees this mass of dark-colored bodies heading towards two very young boys, and they actually managed to, as Maharaj was explaining yesterday, use their particular technique of just gripping the hind legs of the donkeys and then twirling them about and then having sufficient strength. I mean, it's very difficult to throw a heavy object upwards. So actually, this is what they're doing, not only is it described from the description I gave today that Lord Balaram is using his left hand, which is usually considered the less strong hand, to grab two hind legs. So again, having a grip to be able to grip two hind legs and of creatures that are actually in an angry state, and then actually twirling the body around, so above the head, which again, raising a heavy object above the head is not an easy thing, and then hurling upwards. So it gives you an indication immediately, one can infer there's huge strength on the part of Krishna and Balaram. And the hurling upwards is not merely a little bit. When one considers an extremely tall tree, like equivalent to a palm tree, I was just in Orlando, so I got a sense of the height of palm trees. So it's extremely high. If one imagines perhaps 5 feet below the height of the ceiling, that is how high these bodies were being hurled. Actually, it's one of my very favorite visuals that I have in this pastime that, and later on we'll come to it, that those bodies up there look like these dark clouds and sort of a little bit reddish. So actually there was even a beauty that went with, one imagines donkeys aren't that attractive, but there was a beauty even with them being in the top of trees. So, yeah. Now, the whole description, it's actually highlighting a great deal of action. So there's the donkeys charging to kill, there's their violent kicking, and in Bhagavad Gita, so I'm making a leap because we're getting some sense of a discrepancy in the way these donkeys and Denakasura are approaching Krishna and Balaram, because clearly there's some inability to understand who they're dealing with. So I thought to make a leap. Krishna points out, and this is from Bhagavad Gita 2:16, that the seers of the truth have concluded. So there's an interesting conclusion. So persons who are looking with some understanding, they understand the truth of the matter. They're concluding that of the non-existent, meaning the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. So this is interesting that the why I'm drawing attention to this particular verse is that this particular understanding is the underpinning for so much of the actions that one performs. Just understanding, this fundamental understanding that the body, it has cells that are undergoing different kinds of actions and reactions. And even though this may not be visible when one sees the external form of a body, one can understand that there are these actions and reactions going on internally of the cells because it's witnessed by the fact that there's growth. So for instance, recently I got to see a little baby that had been born 3 months ago. So naturally, I'd seen a picture from earlier on, in the space of 3 months, this baby had got, chubbier, and there was, movement of the arms and legs that were much more controlled than earlier. So one understands that internally there's these actions and reactions going on with the cells. Or even somebody who gets a pain in their abdomen and then goes for a diagnosis and discovers that actually there's some sort of growth that's happened in some organ that's cancerous. Even that that's an indication that, the cells are functioning in some way, some action or reaction. Of course, in that case, there's malfunction of the cells, but it's going on internally. So, and naturally also one can see it as the body starts aging. So externally you see that, you compare a picture of somebody, from 10 years earlier and then 10 years later, and you think, oh, there's some signs of age, there's slower movement. So you understand, internally there's constant movement of these cells. So, but with all that movement going on, the soul is actually permanently remaining the same. So means that there isn't that same kind of aging or, a physiological, so to speak, change going on. So this is a conclusion. Krishna tells us that all seers of the truth, both the personalists and the impersonalists, meaning those that have some understanding of Krishna and Balaram being Supreme Personality of Godhead, or even those who merely understand something of his energy and do not yet understand that that energy comes from a specific entity, all understand this particular point. And Srila Prabhupada puts it that having this understanding is that it's a kind of beginning instruction which is going to allow for the removal of a huge amount of ignorance. And the ignorance that's getting removed is that actually that spirit soul, that unchanging spirit soul, is having an eternal relationship with a supreme soul, meaning that as it was visible to Denakasura, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, and Balaram. So there's going to, the fundamental understanding, this particular understanding, is going to allow for the establishment of some connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meaning that eternal relationship that will be there because he's a worshipable entity and one is the worshipper. So this is very, very significant because there has to be some understanding through this connection that's going to be made that there's a difference between that little spirit soul inhabiting a particular body, whether it's the human body or whether it's a donkey body as is described in this particular pastime, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's a difference. So I'm highlighting this because of the huge discrepancy in understanding that was there between Denakasura and his donkey friends and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram. So this particular occasion that's highlighted here, it actually was an opportunity for Krishna and Balaram to exhibit their internal potency, their internal spiritual strength in the company of their very fortunate cowherd friends. So there's a particular way that the cowherd friends had addressed Krishna and Balaram. So they had said to them, so this is what led to this whole scenario. They had said, and I'm quoting from, this is Krishna book, "Dear Balaram, you are very powerful. Your arms are very strong. Dear Krishna, you are very expert in killing all kinds of disturbing demons. Will you kindly note that just near this place there is a big forest of the name Talavan. The forest is full of palm trees, and all the trees are filled with fruits. Some have fallen down, and some are very ripe, even in the trees. It is a very nice place, but because of a great demon, Denakasura, it is very difficult to go there. No one can reach the trees to collect the fruits. Dear Krishna and Balaram, this demon is present there in the form of an ass, and he is surrounded by similar demon friends who have assumed the same shape. So here's how the cowherd boys are understanding Krishna and Balaram. Prior to entering this forest, they're noting the great strength of the arms of Lord Balaram, and even referring to Lord Balaram clearly as, "You are very powerful." And notice their particular understanding also of the external form. I mean, the way they put it, that the donkey entities, they've assumed this shape. So, proceeding. Balaram, indeed, he comes to exhibit his extraordinary strength. Because what we hear is that Balaram immediately yanked the trees with his arms. The minute he entered the forest, that's what he did. It was his first action. So he was exhibiting his strength, which was the strength of an elephant. So because of this jerking, all the ripe fruits fell down to the ground. Now, Denakasura, who had been living there in the form of an ass, he approached, but with great force. So you're getting the force of Lord Balaram shaking the trees, and this is the response of Denakasura. It's with great force. So Balaram with great force, Denakasura is coming with great force. He approached with such great force that the whole field started shaking. And all the trees moved as though there was an earthquake. So he's causing the ground to shudder with the force with which he's pounding it. So obviously a body that has huge amount of strength too. So the demon appeared before Balaram and kicked his chest with his hind legs. So this was his, one imagines this great force being harnessed just in the same way that the whole earth was shaking, being harnessed just to kick one simple little boy standing there. I mean, it seems very extreme. And this is Balaram's response. At first, he didn't say anything. And then he responded with great anger. And then the demon kicked him again, and this time more vehemently. And this time, Balaram immediately caught hold of the legs of the ass with one hand and wheeling him around threw him into the treetops. And while he was being wheeled about by Balaram, the demon lost his life. So it's interesting that collision of the two forces, so to speak. One wonders how you stop an uncontrollable energy, this demon that's causing the earth to shudder so violently. So all the strength was in the legs. So that's the very part that Lord Balaram grips and with his left hand. And as I described earlier on, just showing his incredible strength that, that he harnessed that force to cause this kind of centrifugal force. And then the same force propelled the body upwards. I mean, you can see it's not a simple task. Yeah. Now, the only experience I have of this kind of centrifugal force is anyway, this is making a leap. Sorry for the slight distraction from the intricacies of the story, but one's mind always relates things according to one's own experience. So I have always a desire to do things in the most ecologically conscious way, and so because machines tend to produce a lot of heat, which is supposed to affect the barrier around the earth. I tried to avoid, or did for many, many years. So I had a little machine that would take exactly 2 minutes to spin clothing around. And the centrifugal force was so great that the clothing would come out like barely damp. So what force it must have taken, that centrifugal force, to extract all the moisture and wetness from clothing. So centrifugal force is pretty powerful for, sucking out some things. So in this case, the centrifugal force, sucked out the life of the demon, because it just says, and he died. So one wonders how it is. So it's that centrifugal force, it's so extreme that it pulls, it extracts something. So in his case, it extracted, the soul got extracted, so to speak. So, yeah. Now, so when Balaram threw the demon into the biggest palm tree, and the demon's body was so heavy, so as opposed to my clothing, which used to come out quite light, this body minus the soul was super, super heavy. And you often find that you think that, body will become lighter if the soul is not there. But actually here we read that it's like, dead weight, because the soul propels, creates lightness, movement. Minus the soul, it's like this heavy weight. So there's that heavy body falling on the palm tree, and because of the heavy weight, the tree kills over, and so it knocks down the other trees. And so several of them fall down. So the description from Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada writing, it appeared as if a great hurricane was passing through the forest, and all the trees were falling down one after another. So a lot of force going on here, because now it's the impression of a hurricane with all the trees keeling over. Now, going back to the idea that this fundamental understanding that needs to be there, worship of the Lord is the only means for destroying some sort of lamentation, distress. And this kind of worship of the Lord, it comes or arises from recognizing the difference between oneself as the worshiper and the object of one's worship. And this is this point is made by Srila Baladev Vijayabusan. What's really been taught is that there's a real, and this is the teaching of Krishna when he's talking about the fundamental understanding that I touched on earlier. There's a real as opposed to an illusory shelter. So for Denakasura, his shelter was the sense of ownership of a forest. And the real shelter is actually seeing Krishna as the worshipable object, which then immediately causes one to check whatever force, power, ability one's got and think about how it's going to be used. So it puts one into proper alignment. Now, Krishna is described as being Amsi, or he who's the shelter of the dependents. So he's the object who's worthy of worship. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he's writing about Denakasura, he points out that Denakasura personifies the ass of blunt judgment. And he was killed by Balaram, the transcendental reservoir of all living entities. So notice what the issue is. Judgment has got blunted. Just lack of this fundamental understanding of the Krishna being the worshipable object, and that distinction that has to be there between the external covering and the soul, means that one's judgment is going to be very blunt. So there isn't any sharpness of being able to make proper discernment for one's actions if that fundamental understanding isn't there. So this is what Denakasura is actually personifying, according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this blunt judgment, because he's lacking the fundamental understanding. And I'm going to read the Sanskrit of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur making this statement, because it's so significant for this whole pastime. So he says, Stula buddhi swarupoyam Gardabo denukasura nasto bud by davena suda jivena durmati. So Srila Baladev Vijayabusan, going back to him talking about having to get an understanding of where your shelter should lie, he goes into a very intricate discussion, and I was a little bit tired last night when I was reading, and I thought, I hope I can relay this properly because it was intricate. So he discusses that Krishna and Balaram, they don't have this problem of seeing in a dual way, meaning that they don't see such a difference between themselves and living entities. And this is apparently also the case with persons who are liberated souls. Even after they don't see or they don't have this dual vision, and all kind of illusory ideas have been destroyed, particularly the one of in some way seeing oneself as a separate soul, having no connection, no relationship with the Supreme Soul. Still, they understand that actually, still I'm a small spirit soul, and there's the Supreme Soul. But this kind of vision, it doesn't have the bondage element, meaning one isn't bound to material concepts which blunt one's judgment so severely. And so duality is defined as seeing in terms of what one is desiring or hating. And if one observes in oneself how one's mind is functioning, there's always that thing of one is drawn to something or one is repelled by something. It's constantly there. So, so one can actually be seeing in that way. And if you don't have that fundamental understanding of the soul and the body being separate, and that the soul doesn't change and the body is changing, then looking with the vision of the mind means that one is always wanting something or hating something. And this kind of perceptual reality is caused by illusory energy. That's the teaching. And this way of perceiving happens when one is being controlled by illusory energy. And it means that one just cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So sometimes, like I'm always intrigued, in the temple setting, sometimes visitors come who haven't been exposed to this concept that one has a relationship with the Supreme Soul and one is the soul needing to cultivate that relationship. One finds that persons can't even like see the deities properly, or they actually have difficulty to see anything except what's in their mind. And in fact, persons will start telling you about themselves. I am this, and this is the work I do, and they cannot even hear a single thing connected to the Supreme Personality of God. And I always used to think, it's very interesting, this. And you see it over and over again. Usually a person has to present a whole picture of themselves, their mental reality. So this is because of being controlled by illusory energy and lacking that fundamental understanding. It means that reality is just perceptual on the mental plane. It's like, I like to see myself like this. I don't like to see that. It's very limited, the extreme ends of the spectrum. So now, a devotee who's gone through the whole process of purification and isn't deluded any longer by having this mental perceptual reality of desire and hatred, that personality can understand that Krishna and Balaram in this particular pastime, they're actually appearing by their internal potencies, so their internal spiritual strengths. Everything has been beautifully orchestrated, where they're exhibiting their internal spiritual strength in relation to the souls that were present there. So that's why a lot of this pastime has to do with this, forces being used by the donkeys. It's been an opposing force has been shown by Krishna and Balaram. It's a very reciprocal relationship, always very reciprocal. So all that Dinakasura and his ass demons could do was, thunder with their hooves, exhibit anger, make the earth shake. The response, okay, grab the hooves, use equivalent force to the centrifugal force, hurl them. It's all very physical. So it's a reciprocal relationship, and it's by the internal spiritual strength of Krishna and Balaram. So the relationship is there even with the obliviousness of and lacking the understanding on the part of Dinakasura and his ass demons friends. So naturally, we heard quite a bit of something of that perceptual reality of Dinakasura and his ass demons, just the idea that the forest was their domain and anybody else was barred from having access to the fruit of the trees within that forest. So it's a perceptual reality of, this is my particular terrain, and there's a perimeter that, encloses the space, and this space, therefore, is all mine. So it means that, there's that desire to possess, and there's the hatred of any other living entities having access to what belongs to oneself. So it means that judgment then has got skewed, and so even with being confronted by Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, there's that envious mood, a kind of envious mood towards the Supreme Lord. And that's witnessed in how Dinakasura and his ass demons approached Krishna and Balaram, because today's verse was that they were enraged upon seeing the death of Dinakasura, and thus they all immediately ran to attack Krishna and Balaram. So this is the skewed judgment. Srila Baladev Vijayabhusan, he actually says that Lord Krishna, when he sees that there's somebody who doesn't have this kind of proper judgment, he doesn't engage in teaching that person. So this is Srila Baladev Vijayabhusan talking. Because that person wouldn't be able to discern the truth of the matter. And meaning he wouldn't be able to understand himself as a subject who's an illusion. I mean, that requires, a certain detachment to be able to see oneself as being illusioned. So it means that persons who fall into this delusion of this dualistic perceptual reality of, desiring and hating, they usually think that the Lord is created by some kind of material energy. And so this is the understanding that usually comes in that, with that particular reality that one inhabits. So it means that always the person is thinking in terms of, that they're going to be honored or dishonored, or that they're going to experience pleasure, or that they're going to experience pain, or like Denakasura, this is my forest, I'm master of this forest. Because again, there's complete inability to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead when there's this kind of delusion with this dualistic perceptual reality. And Krishna puts it this way, Bhagavad Gita 7:27, he says, O Scion of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arising from desire and hate. So bewilderment is the word. Can't see reality properly, and that verse is Ichadvesha Samutena Vanda Mohena Bharata Sarva Bhutani Samohan Sarge Yanti Parantapa. So the subject matter here really is there isn't really, there's a non-difference between the soul and the Lord. So the Lord is seen, as Srila Sanatana Goswami puts it. I'm going to read how he puts it, and it's in relation to this pastime. You knocked down rows of tall palm trees, O killer of the jackass demon, and you felt bliss at being praised by all the cowherd boys. The hearing and chanting of your glories brings every virtue. So that's the proper position, that one's virtuous nature is enhanced when one's glorifying these amazing pastimes of Lord Krishna and Balaram. And in particular, if one has understood that the soul and the inciter of action, meaning the Lord, are different, thus gaining the love of the Lord, one attains freedom from death. That's from Svetasvatara Upanishad. So poor Denakasura and his ass demons, they met the inevitable end of death. So the opposite happens when that fundamental understanding comes into position. One actually attains freedom from death. So meaning one doesn't have to go through any longer through this great suffering perceptual reality of always feeling desire and hatred. So that was some understanding on this very short verse. If there's any thoughts on the matter.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. It's a very nice class. Lots of interesting content. I was thinking about how you're bringing out this point that what does Dhenukasura represent, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, right? This bewilderment, not knowing what is reality, what is right, what is wrong. I've also heard that Dhenukasura represents this tendency to want to protect the fruits of devotional service, the deep realizations, the esoteric concepts, and not sharing them with other people. So I was wondering if you've also heard that, and if there's a relationship between this idea of, being bewildered and not knowing what is reality, and this other anartha of not being able to share the fruits of devotional service with others. I was wondering if you've heard that, and if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess that's an expanded understanding. I hadn't come across it, at least in researching for this class, that Denakasura was in some way, that the forest with Denakasura being its inhabitant, and the ripe fruits being there, that it also, by his holding on to that concept of being master of that terrain, that it was also an indication of not wanting to share spiritual understanding with others. Because of the, I guess, how I was understanding from reading our acharyas, that there's a lack of proper judgment. Certainly, the fundamental understanding of the distinction between, the body, the physical body, and the existence of the soul, and then going on from there, how it manifests itself through existing in a perceptual reality, certainly would imply in the long run that there's not actually any understanding even of spiritual fruits that come from having the proper understanding. I mean, for a person with a or an entity with a material, perceptual, mental reality, it's completely alien, the idea that there's fruits that come from a spiritual reality, that one is in a subservient position, not seeing oneself as a master, but rather as a servitor of a greater human, a greater entity, the Supreme Lord, is actually in a position of receiving so much wealth. It would seem that the concept is very alien, very, very alien. I mean, the world of spiritual realization and spiritual growth is such an extremely subtle world, that for one who needs tangible physical objects, visible physical things to hold on to, it's a little bit outside the realm of understanding. I mean, that one is actually, that the reality has to do with examining those very concepts that a materialist holds dear, that of being the owner of something, the enjoyer of something, that extreme selfishness, that is actually being unhinged by spiritual reality. You could say in that sense, not being attuned to spiritual fruits on the part of Denakasura. If you push it, you could say in that sense, there wouldn't be any understanding. Because, I mean, the paths are very different. The way of looking at the world and one's reality is completely different. I mean, to be engaged in a process where there's internal examination and relying on the strength coming from the Supreme Lord as opposed to one's own strength is a very different reality to where one is relying on one's own strength, and one's reality has to do with one's mastering everything around one. It's a very different reality.
Thank you. That was such a nice analogy, that if someone requires to see physical, tangible objects as the measures of success or accomplishment, but that's not how spiritual life always works. So that was very nice. I also wanted to share one appreciation. When you were explaining how the centrifugal force pulls out the life of the Inukasura, I was thinking how, since Balaram represents Guru Tattva, and the Inukasura represents this bewilderment of not knowing what is reality, then in a certain way the Guru also spins the disciple and extracts this this the bewilderment from his disciple's mind, where the disciple can't distinguish between what is good for his spiritual life versus what is not good for his spiritual life, right? This is the delusion, and the guru is actually very much, in terms of because of guiding his disciple, is able to, or her disciple, is able to, extract this foolishness from the person's mind.
That's nicely put, putting it in terms of the supermost closest representative of Krishna, and a tangible representative, because one can interact with that entity while one is, I guess, clearing one's view of reality, that that spiritual master is actually also clearing bewilderment. It means there's reminders of what the spiritual reality is. I mean, a classic one, like I remember early on in our spiritual life, our spiritual master had clarified something, like Subal and I had the thought that, perhaps if we're living in a different country, with a different kind of material arrangement, then that would enhance spiritual life. And then, one is told, no, actually, having spiritual strength creates the perfect material reality without one's trying to create the perfect material reality. So that was, an eye-opener, because at that moment, one's thinking different. So indeed, your point of, removing bewilderment is very spot on for the role of the spiritual master, because some ideas one holds are still connected to seeing in that kind of dualistic way of, you still desire the material comfort. So hence one thinks, oh, then spiritual life will follow fine if the material comfort is there. Everything should be in order. But that's not spiritual reality. Spiritual reality is that one focuses on gaining spiritual strength, and automatically the material reality is also perfectly in order. No extra endeavor, or not trying to put that first. That's not important. The spiritual reality remains the real reality that one needs to keep the focus on, and everything else then falls into place. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.